The stone entrance sits halfway up a dry hillside, its surface worn smooth by centuries of wind and dust. Small cracks run through the limestone, and cool air escapes from the darkness beyond. Nothing about it looks extraordinary. Yet according to one of the most mysterious ancient Jewish writings ever preserved, this kind of place was chosen to describe what happens after death, not as a symbol, but as a carefully organized waiting place where every soul is separated before the final judgment. For centuries, the Book of Enoch remained unknown across much of Europe. By the late 4th century, it had fallen out of use in most Christian traditions after it was excluded from the biblical canon, although it continued to be preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. As copies disappeared from common circulation, generations grew up without ever reading its remarkable descriptions of the afterlife. Everything changed in the 18th century, when the Scottish explorer James Bruce returned from Ethiopia with Ge'ez manuscripts of the Book of Enoch. Suddenly, scholars had access once again to a text that had been largely unavailable in Europe for hundreds of years. Then, in the 20th century, fragments of Enoch were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, confirming that the book was far older than many had assumed, and that it had been copied and valued by ancient Jewish communities long before the time of Christianity. One passage, in particular, has fascinated readers ever since. It describes the afterlife as a place divided into 4 separate chambers. Each chamber has a purpose. Each soul is assigned to one of them. And according to the text, that assignment reflects how each person lived before death. In the next several minutes, you'll see what the Book of Enoch actually says about these 4 chambers, why this passage has fascinated historians and biblical scholars for generations, and how ancient readers understood its message. If ancient biblical writings and forgotten religious texts fascinate you, hit subscribe. Every week, we uncover what was preserved, debated, and sometimes overlooked in the history of Scripture. But here's what makes this stranger. The description doesn't appear as a passing comment or poetic image. It appears during one of Enoch's guided journeys, where an angel leads him through places hidden from ordinary human sight. The language is unusually detailed. It speaks of a great mountain, solid rock, and hollow spaces carved within it. These are not presented as identical resting places. They are separated from one another, each prepared for a different group of souls awaiting what comes next. The key passage is found in 1 Enoch, chapter 22. There, Enoch says he was shown a mountain containing 4 hollow places. The text explains that these divisions exist until the day of judgment. Some contain the righteous, others hold those who suffered injustice. Others are reserved for the wicked who escaped punishment during life. Every chamber serves a different purpose, yet all exist within the same mysterious landscape. At first glance, it seems like a simple description of the world beyond death. But as we continue, the details become increasingly precise. The identities of those placed in each chamber and the reasons they are separated reveal a vision of justice that is unlike almost anything found elsewhere in ancient Jewish literature. The number 4 is one of the most intriguing details in the entire passage. The text could have divided humanity into the righteous and the wicked. It could have described a single place where everyone waited together until judgment. Instead, the author carefully separates the afterlife into 4 distinct chambers, each serving a different purpose. That choice has drawn the attention of historians and biblical scholars for generations. Within the worldview reflected in the Book of Enoch, justice is not simply about where a person ends up. It is also about how God remembers every life before the final judgment arrives. The text suggests that the experience of waiting is not the same for everyone. Each chamber reflects a different relationship between a person's actions, their circumstances, and the justice still to come. The first chamber remains the place of peace for the righteous. They are not portrayed as anxious or uncertain. Instead, the description gives the impression that their future has already been settled, even though the final judgment has not yet taken place. Their waiting is filled with expectation rather than fear. The second chamber carries a very different emotion. Here are those who suffered injustice. According to the text, they have not been forgotten. Their voices continue to cry out before God, not because He is unaware of what happened, but because the time for complete justice has not yet arrived. The image reinforces a recurring theme found throughout Scripture. God hears the cries of the innocent, even when earthly justice fails. The third chamber introduces another layer. These souls are described as people who lived in wickedness, but were never held accountable during their earthly lives. From a human perspective, they escaped judgment. They died with their power, wealth, or influence intact. Yet the Book of Enoch insists that death did not erase their responsibility. Instead, it postponed the judgment they had avoided. Then comes the fourth chamber. Its description is brief but striking. The text presents it as a place for those whose destiny is especially severe. Ancient interpreters have debated exactly how this chamber should be understood, and translations differ in several details. While the passage is not always interpreted the same way, the overall picture remains consistent. Not every soul enters the same condition after death, and divine justice takes into account more than outward appearances. This careful separation reveals something important about the message of the Book of Enoch. The author is not merely describing the afterlife. He is addressing a question that troubled many people in the ancient world, and still troubles people today. Why do the righteous sometimes suffer, while the wicked seem to prosper? Why do innocent people die before justice is done? Why are some crimes never answered in this life? The answer offered by Enoch is that history does not end at the grave. According to the text, every human life continues into a place where nothing is forgotten. Hidden acts remain known. Unanswered cries remain heard. Delayed justice remains certain, even if its fulfillment lies in the future. As Enoch stands before these four chambers, carved into the mountain, the vision becomes more than a description of the world beyond death. It becomes a declaration that every human life matters, every choice carries weight, and every act of righteousness or injustice will ultimately be brought before God's judgment. But these four chambers are only one part of the Book of Enoch's much larger picture. To understand why this vision mattered so deeply to ancient readers, we have to look at the extraordinary beings, heavenly judgments, and cosmic events that surround it, and how they shaped the entire message of the book. The vision of the four chambers does not stand alone. In the Book of Enoch, it is part of a much larger picture in which heaven, earth, and the unseen world are closely connected. Events in one realm affect the other, and the final judgment is presented as the moment when every hidden action is brought into the light. To understand why the waiting place matters, we first have to understand who Enoch is. The Hebrew Bible says remarkably little about him. In Genesis 5, Enoch appears in a short genealogy before the flood. Yet one statement has fascinated readers for thousands of years. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, because God took him. Unlike the generations listed before and after him, the usual words announcing his death are missing. That brief passage became the foundation for an entire collection of writings that explore Enoch's heavenly journeys. In these accounts, he is portrayed as a witness who is shown realities hidden from ordinary human beings. He sees heavenly courts, the the punishment of rebellious angels, the movement of the stars, and the future judgment of humanity. The four chambers belong within that larger vision. They are not presented as isolated rooms beneath the earth. They are one part of an ordered universe where every being has an assigned place. Angels have responsibilities. Nations have histories. Human lives have consequences. Even death does not erase accountability. One of the strongest themes running through the Book of Enoch is patience. Again and again, the text acknowledges that justice appears delayed. Wicked rulers gain power. Violence spreads across the earth. Innocent people suffer. The faithful wonder why nothing seems to change. But the answer is always the same. The delay is not the absence of judgment. It is the time before judgment. That idea appears repeatedly throughout the book. The rebellious watchers await their sentence. Human souls await their final destiny. Even the forces of evil are portrayed as existing under limits that have already been set by God. Nothing continues forever without accountability. This perspective helps explain why the four chambers are separated so carefully. The divisions are not meant to satisfy human curiosity about geography and the afterlife. Instead, they communicate a theological message. Every person's situation has already been seen. Every act has already been weighed. The final verdict has not yet been announced publicly, but nothing has escaped God's attention. That message would have carried enormous significance for ancient communities living through oppression, exile, and injustice. Many people died without seeing fairness restored. Empires rose and fell, while ordinary families endured suffering that seemed unanswered. The Book of Enoch responds by shifting the timeline. Justice is not measured only by what happens before death. It continues beyond it. This is one reason the text remained influential in many Jewish circles during the Second Temple period. Fragments discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls show that parts of Enoch were copied and preserved alongside other important religious writings, demonstrating that these ideas were taken seriously within at least some ancient communities. The vision of the four chambers, therefore, serves as more than an account of the unseen world. It reinforces a central conviction running throughout the entire book. God knows, God remembers, and God will judge. Yet one question still remains. If the Book of Enoch contains such a detailed picture of the afterlife, why does it differ from the way many people understand these subjects today? The answer lies not only in the history of the text itself, but also in how different religious communities received, preserved, translated, and interpreted it over the centuries. Over the centuries, the Book of Enoch followed a very different path from most of the books that eventually became part of the biblical canon. That history helps explain why its description of the four chambers feels unfamiliar to many readers today. During the Second Temple period, Enoch was widely known in some Jewish communities. The discovery of multiple Aramaic fragments among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran showed that the book was copied long before the time of Jesus. This was an important finding because it confirmed that Enoch was not a late medieval composition, but a work with deep roots in ancient Judaism. The New Testament also contains an interesting connection. In the Epistle of Jude, verses 14 and 15 closely echo a prophecy found in 1st Enoch. This has led scholars to conclude that the author of Jude was familiar with the book or with traditions closely related to it. That does not settle questions about its authority, but it does demonstrate that Enoch was known within some early Christian circles. Even so, its journey was far from straightforward. As different Christian communities considered which writings belonged in the biblical canon, Enoch gradually fell out of use across much of the Mediterranean world. Over time, complete copies disappeared from Europe, surviving primarily through manuscripts preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Because of that preservation, the text remained available there even while it became largely unknown elsewhere. When European scholars encountered the book again in the 18th century, through manuscripts brought from Ethiopia, they found a work that contained ideas both familiar and surprising. Some themes resembled passages already known from Scripture, while others, such as the detailed vision of the four chambers, expanded on subjects only briefly mentioned elsewhere. This is one reason readers continue to debate the book today. Some approach it as an important witness to ancient Jewish beliefs during the centuries before the New Testament. Others value it for the way it helps illuminate themes found in later biblical writings. Still others regard it as inspired within the tradition that has preserved it continuously. Whatever conclusion someone reaches, the historical importance of the Book of Enoch is difficult to dismiss. Its influence can be traced in ancient literature. Its manuscripts have been recovered from one of archaeology's most significant discoveries, and its ideas continue to shape discussions about angels, judgment, and the afterlife. The vision of the four chambers is a good example. Rather than presenting death as the end of human accountability, the passage portrays history as moving toward a final reckoning. The righteous wait in hope. Those who suffered injustice await vindication. Those who escaped justice during life remain accountable. And every soul stands within a framework where God is aware of what has taken place. Whether one reads the Book of Enoch as sacred scripture, as an important ancient Jewish text, or as a historical document, its central message in this passage remains remarkably consistent. Human justice is limited, but divine justice is neither forgotten nor abandoned. That is why the image of the mountain with its four chambers has continued to capture attention for centuries. It offers a vision in which every life is remembered, every action has significance, and every unanswered question ultimately moves toward a day when, according to the text, nothing hidden will remain hidden forever. The image that opens this journey is also the one that brings it to its conclusion. A mountain of solid rock, its hidden chambers carved deep within the stone, silent and unseen. According to the Book of Enoch, those chambers are not random spaces. They exist for a purpose. Every soul enters the place prepared for it, and every person waits for the same final moment, the judgment of God. When we step back and look at the entire vision, a clear pattern begins to emerge. The Book of Enoch does not describe the afterlife as a place where everyone shares the same experience. It presents an ordered waiting place. The righteous are kept apart in peace. Those who suffered injustice await vindication. Those who escaped accountability in life do not escape it forever. And the final division reminds the reader that God's judgment considers every human life with complete justice. That structure reflects one of the book's central themes. Nothing is forgotten, not an act of faithfulness, not an act of violence, not a hidden crime, not the cry of an innocent person whose voice seemed to disappear from history. Again and again, Enoch's vision returns to the same message. What appears unfinished in this life is not abandoned. The delay between death and final judgment is not presented as emptiness, but as part of God's appointed order. For many readers, this explains why the passage has remained so compelling across the centuries. It does more than describe what lies beyond death. It asks a question that every generation eventually faces. If justice is not always completed during our lifetime, where does it go? The Book of Enoch answers by pointing beyond history itself. According to its vision, justice is preserved until the day when every person stands before God. Whether someone lived in obscurity or power, whether they died peacefully or through violence, nothing ultimately escapes divine knowledge. That perspective also helps explain why the text continued to be copied and preserved by ancient communities. Even where opinions differed about its place alongside other sacred writings, its themes of accountability, hope, and future judgment remain deeply influential. At the same time, it is important to remember that the Book of Enoch is not accepted as canonical in most Jewish and Christian traditions, though it is part of the biblical canon of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Its descriptions of the afterlife, therefore, should be understood within the context of that ancient work and its historical influence. Even with those differences, the vision leaves a lasting impression: a mountain, 4 hidden chambers, souls waiting in silence, a judgment that has not yet arrived, but, according to the text, cannot be avoided. Perhaps that is why this passage continues to invite careful reading. It challenges the assumption that history ends at the grave and instead presents a universe where every action carries eternal significance. The stone mountain remains in the mind's eye. Its hidden chambers remain unseen. Its silence remains unbroken. And within the pages of the Book of Enoch, they are still there, still waiting, still holding every soul in the place assigned to it, exactly as the ancient text describes, until the day of final judgment.